Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our next live session. I'll be your producer for our session, but before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Microsoft Reactor channel. With that, I'll turn it over to our speaker for today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. So excited to see so many of you in the chat for such an exciting topic. We're talking about the DP-700 today, so that Fabric Data Engineer certification. Just out of curiosity, where's everyone checking in from? I know over here I'm checking in from the west coast of the state, so here out in Southern California. And Alexi, where are you coming out from?
I'm from Finland, the home of Santa Claus.
Very, very exciting. I know we love Santa Claus over here, so always happy to be presenting with someone from Finland and someone who can go ahead and give us a lot of insight into this. And just out of curiosity as well, I know a lot of you are excited to take that DP-700 exam. Has anyone registered? Just getting started on the or just studying right now, not yet registered yet? Would love to hear where you're at in the chat.
Yeah, we will be all.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, are we again here? I think so. There was the video playing. So this is a live session. As you can see, everything is live, so things can happen. But we have a pretty packed session today, so we have a lot of topics to cover, right? We're going to cover the entire DP-700, or all the topics that are in the exam, at least quite high level, or to go some details. But should we get started?
Let's go ahead and get started. And looking at the chat, see a lot of people all around the world. So super cool to see that we have so much global participation on this one, and really excited to share a little bit more about this certification. But before we dive deeper, we want to go ahead and introduce ourselves. So I'll go ahead and let Alexi introduce himself first.
Yeah, I can do my introduction. So here's me. My name is Partton. I'm Microsoft Data Platform MVP from Finland, and I'm working as a data architect and team lead at this company called Norin. That is basically a Microsoft partner company. So I do consulting as a day job for my clients. Then I have a ton of other things that I do on my free time, and there is like a small snapshot of those things that I do. Some people might have seen my YouTube videos on my YouTube channel, Partton and Master Microsoft Fabric. And there, for example, I have an 11-hour video for DP-700. So if you're preparing to take the exam, definitely check that out. Then I have also my community Fabric Forge, where I teach Microsoft Fabric topics with other people. And we also have like weekly live calls there and all that good stuff. And then I have my CertiA certification exam preparation platform that mainly offers like practice questions for different Microsoft certification exams like DP-700, DP-600. And there you can also find some free questions to also, for example, for DP-700. So if you need some practice questions, that is the place to go. But you can find all of those resources by going to the Linktree address that is shown on the screen, or by scanning the QR code. And on top of these things, I do a lot of other stuff, like run a local user group here, and also I'm a founder of the Microsoft Fabric Discord server and that kind of stuff. So a lot of things. But maybe, Samson, you would like to introduce yourself next.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and it's pretty hard to follow up to Alexi, but hi, for those who don't know who I am, my name is Samson Trong. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP in Microsoft Fabric, also a Microsoft Fabric super user. In my day job, I am a data and AI consultant in the Microsoft Data Platform, and you can go ahead and find me as well as on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog, discoveringallthingsanalyst.com, or you can check me out on YouTube. I post a lot of content about Fabric tutorials and a lot of cool things, whether it becomes Power BI or Fabric. Without further ado, also wanted to I'll let Alexi introduce our moderators and our people in the chat who will be keeping us going throughout this session.
Yeah, so me and Samson, we are not doing this alone. So we have two brilliant moderators there. We have Jeff and then we have Kevin there, and they are ready to answer to all of your DP-700 or Fabric questions. So keep them coming and they will answer those. And then we also have at least Fabric Pam there also to answer your questions. So the chat is also well covered there. And if we have some time after the session, we might have some live questions after the show, but can't really promise since this is a live session and we try to keep this within the 1 hour limit, so we don't want to go over time. But yeah, maybe let's move forward.
Awesome. And before we actually get into the meat and potatoes and the content, do want to go over a few promotional items we have in terms of some upcoming exciting activities coming out in the event space. So we do have our Fabric Data Days monthly. The next session is going to be on both April 28th as well as April 29th. And these are going to be live in 2 time zones just so that we can have people joining from us from all around the world. And what this Fabric Data Days monthly session is going to be about that integration blueprint. How do you choose that right path in Microsoft Fabric? And it's also going to include an end-to-end demo so you can see Microsoft Fabric in action. In addition, for those who missed out on FabCon or SQLCon which just passed, or you attended but you're a little overwhelmed, you want a recap of all the key pieces of that conference, we are currently going through this Fabric Conference SQL Conference recap series where we have a few different session dates going over some of the key concepts and core components, and we'd love to have you join us in some of these future sessions. In addition, we would love to have your feedback as well. So if you're new to Fabric or know someone who is new to Fabric, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what's working, what's not working, and what can help shape the product going forward. And whether you're a Fabric or a Power BI user currently, we do want to hear from you as well. So there is a Fabric user panel that is currently going on where you can share your feedback directly with Microsoft engineers, designers, as well as participate in research studies and really influence that product roadmap. So if you're interested in giving your feedback, the links are there. Go ahead and sign up and register, and we'd love to connect. In addition, let's say today you do get really pumped up about that DP-700, you get really, really excited and you want to get a little deeper. We are hosting free instructor-led hands-on workshops as well. So we have Fabric Analysts in a day, which will really show you how Power BI users can really take that next step and evolve into that Fabric Data Analyst and improve their experience overall in the entire Fabric Data platform. In addition, there is also real-time intelligence in a day. So if you're looking to learn more about real-time intelligence, how we move from batch data ingestion to real-time data ingestion, this one-day workshop is a great fit for you. And the one I know a lot of people are excited about is after today's sessions, you can get DP-700 certified for free. So a few things I want to call out is in order to get this free certification, you do need to request your voucher today. So you need to request it immediately after this session and take your exam within the next month. One thing I would like to call out is that supplies are extremely limited, and this offer does end on April 20th or while supplies last. And one thing you do need to mention as you're filling out that form is going to be that code word pipeline to make sure that you can get that form. Awesome. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Alexi to dive into a little bit about what we'll cover today.
Yeah, before I do that, I have to say that you're really good at promoting those things. That was like excellent, like how you went through those previous slides. But yeah, let's move forward. So as a little disclaimer and some expectation management, like this is a 1 hour session and DP-700 is an associate level exam that is not super easy. So you have to like take that into consideration that we don't have time to cover every single topic in that exam in very fine detail. But you will definitely learn some very valuable things for that exam in this session. But if you need more and when you need more exam prep materials, there are some QR codes on the screen that you can scan that will take you to places where you can find those. And the last one of those QR codes is again my Linktree address where you can find my resources that will definitely help you out. But there are a ton of other good resources for DP-700 exam that will definitely help you out. Should we go to the next slide? So what we are going to cover today. So Pam just said that I'm speaking a little low. Am I now speaking better, or does this help? Can you hear me fine, Samson?
I can hear your mind.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so what we are going to cover today is the implementing and managing analytics solution, and then ingesting and transforming data, and monitoring and optimizing solutions. So pretty much like all the things that we have in the DP-700 exam. But like I said, we cannot go into very fine details here because this is a 1 hour session. But yeah, we are going to go through the entire scope here pretty much on a certain level. So should we move forward?
And one thing I wanted to call out as we move forward, Alexi made some good points. This is going to be pretty high level, so really just an entry point for you to get some information on DP-700, and it's not meant to be the end-all be-all of all the information you need to know. However, we do want to hear your feedback. So this is a live and interactive session. We do have our amazing moderators in the chat. So please say hi, make sure to ask questions in the chat, and feel free to connect, interact with each other as we make this a more conversational experience as we go through this. And a little bit about the DP-700 examination. This level is an intermediate level exam, and it is for the role data engineer. So for those who might have taken the previous data engineer certification before Fabric, that would have been the DP-203, which would have been the Azure Data Engineer. This is going to be a very similar to that, but now more looking at it in that Fabric lens. So as we look at it in that Fabric lens, we're really going to be focusing on how do we ingest and transform data within Fabric, how do we secure and manage those analytic solutions, and how do we optimize, monitor those, and make sure those are scalable. Alexi, I know you've worked a lot with this certification, so curious if you have any insights before we dive deep into the skills needed.
Yeah, I have a lot of insights, but I don't know if we have time to cover those. But like I said, this is not like a super easy exam because this is already an intermediate associate level exam, so you should definitely know things quite well. But one thing that I really like about this exam that I think Microsoft has quite well managed to have like a good exam scope for this, because a lot of the things that you need to learn for this exam are very relevant for your like day-to-day job if you work with Fabric. At least they are for me, and I have been using almost every feature and every item that is covered in this exam in my like actual real world projects. There are only like 1 or 2 items that I haven't been actually using that much, but if we count those out, then probably I have been using most of them.
Completely agree with Alexi. And now before we dive into more of the content, I want to go ahead and touch base on some of the high-level skills that you'll need to cover within the DP-700 exam. So some of this DP-700 skills in depth you'll need in terms of the study guide for this exam is a part of the exam will be really focused on implementing and managing those analytic solutions within Microsoft Fabric. I would say this would take roughly 30 to 35% of the exam topics covered. And this is really about more of that administration level. How do we configure the Microsoft Fabric workspace so that it's optimized for those data engineering workloads? How do we implement that lifecycle management, that CI/CD piece within Fabric? As well as how do we configure security and governance across the entire stack? We'll also touch base on how do we orchestrate those processes, how do we automate that data ingestion, that data transformation, and as data moves through Fabric. And moving on to ingestion and data transformation, that's going to be another 30 to 35% of the exam. And that'll cover really designing and implementing these loading patterns, whether it be batch data, streaming data, how do we work with slowly changing dimensions, and how do we actually bring data from the staging layer all the way to that presentation layer. And the last 30 to 35% is really going to be focusing on monitoring those Fabric items and optimizing them for your analytic solutions. So that's identifying and resolving errors, monitoring your capacity, and making sure you're optimizing your performance for your data engineering workloads. Alexi, anything you want to highlight as well on these high-level skills that you need to go into for the exam?
No, I think you covered this very well. So I totally agree with you.
Awesome. And with that, we'll actually go into a little bit more of the content. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Alexi to talk a little about implementing and managing those analytic solutions in Fabric.
can we do a quick test? Does my mic sound any louder? Because Pam was saying that it's a little bit low, but I just adjusted the settings a bit. Does it sound good, Samson? Can you comment?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, then I don't know what's the issue, but yeah, let's move forward. So next we're going to talk about this implement and manage analytics solution, and let's talk about this slide for a moment. So what we are looking at here, basically we are looking at this like a high level architecture picture of Fabric. And if you are not very familiar with Fabric, there are some important concepts here. Like we have the OneLake, for example, that is very important concept in Fabric, and we can see that basically in the center there. And what is OneLake? OneLake is basically this unified data lake in the heart of Microsoft Fabric. So it is the data storage layer, the main data storage layer in Fabric. And if you're familiar with like Azure Data Lake Storage, this is basically a software as a service or SaaS version of that Azure Data Lake. So Microsoft has just packaged it into this into Fabric as this like a SaaS version of the data lake. But basically that is the place where the data is typically written when you ingest it to Fabric. And there are like a ton of different ways to ingest data in the Fabric, and here we can see some of those ways. So here, if we think about the picture or look at the picture from the top, there we can see like different like experiences of Fabric. There is data factory, data engineering, data science, and data warehousing. From the DP-700 perspective, for example, the data factory is one of the most relevant one because it covers things like data pipelines, Dataflow Gen 2. Those are like one of the main data ingestion tools in Microsoft Fabric. And with those, you can easily write data from source systems to OneLake and ingest data that way. Then we have other data ingestion methods that are kind of newer things that have come out with Fabric. One of those is mirroring that we can see on the side. So if we think about that, organizations typically have many different databases, for example, in Azure and on-premises or whatever. This mirroring is a capability that we would be able to mirror the database data in quite near real time to Microsoft Fabric OneLake to Delta Parquet tables. So for example, we would have a database in Azure and we would configure mirroring to that database to OneLake. It would then mirror that data and copy basically that data to OneLake. And the mirroring, we could talk quite long about the technology under the hood, but it works using like a incremental refresh methodology. So it doesn't like always do full copies of the table. Of course, the first run is the full copy, and after that it will just incrementally do those changes and reflect them to OneLake when changes happen in the database. And then another very important feature with Microsoft Fabric and with OneLake are the shortcuts that we can see below of this image there. So what are shortcuts? Shortcuts are these different ways that you can like virtualize data to OneLake. And what this means that, for example, you have data in AWS S3 bucket or Azure Data Lake, and you want to show that data in OneLake, but with shortcuts, you don't need to physically copy that data. So you create a shortcut to that data, which will then show that data like it was in OneLake, but that data is actually physically sitting somewhere else. For example, in Google Cloud Storage, Amazon AWS S3 bucket, or for example, in Azure Data Lake. This is a really, really handy feature, and I really love shortcuts, and I think they are a really, really good way to ingest data and bring them to OneLake, so that OneLake will be then this like one single portal to all the data that a specific organization has. And remember, when we talk about OneLake, there is always only one OneLake per Microsoft Fabric. So that's thing. And how these different data stores then relate to OneLake, maybe we can cover that on the next slide.
Yeah, but before we go to the next slide, That was a great call out, Alexi, on all these shortcuts in mirroring and data ingestion methods. I know when I first looked at this and played with this in Fabric itself, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, I thought we were talking about Microsoft Fabric, but look at all these external vendors and providers we can really integrate in there. And one question I get often that I really want to touch base on is that I often get the question is, so which one is better, mirroring or shortcuts in your opinion? Because a lot of people I know get concerned that, hey, does mirroring consume compute?
Yeah, mirroring actually consumes at least some compute, and the I don't know which of them is better because they are basically for different purposes in many cases. Basically, you can roughly think about that mirroring is for databases and shortcuts is then for these like different like blob data stores. So if you're bringing in files, of course you can mirror delta tables, and these two actually a little bit mix and matches, because when we talk about like Databricks mirroring, if we would go into that rabbit hole, it actually uses metadata mirroring that uses shortcuts on the background. So these are not super black and white, what is mirroring, what is shortcuts. So there is a little bit overlap there, but this is like something that maybe people can explore on their own after the session, because otherwise we would be spending a whole session talk about like mirroring and shortcuts that we could of course do.
Yeah, that's a great call out. It's definitely a case by case basis, and that's what I've had in my experience as well. But awesome. I'll go ahead and move on to that data storage.
Yeah, I kind of covered many of the things that we have on this slide already, like on the previous slide. But one thing that I really want to highlight about OneLake is that if you're new to Microsoft Fabric, you think about that, okay, we have OneLake, and then we have these like different data stores, like, for example, a Lakehouse and a warehouse. So then you could be asking, why do I want to store my data to OneLake when I can store it to Lakehouse or warehouse, for example? But the thing there is that you are actually storing your data to OneLake when you're storing it to Lakehouse or warehouse, for example. They are just these like primary interfaces that you can access, you can use to access data sitting in OneLake. So when you're storing your data to warehouse and Lakehouse, you store them to OneLake under the hood. So that's good to keep in mind if you're new to Fabric. Anything you want to talk about on this slide, Samson?
Yeah, I think you highlighted it really well with storage in Microsoft Fabric. It is really awesome that you do store data once in OneLake. So it really does remove that need for traditional replication of data across your data platform, across your data stack. Yes, there are some instances where you still need to replicate your data, whether that be for retention policies, security policies, or governance policies. But really it just increases your time to value to how fast you can access your data and how easily you can access it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I changed my mic settings a bit because I heard that, or I saw that somebody commented about that in the chat. Is it any better now, or is it still like low? Samson, can you comment?
I'm hearing you. Yep, I'm hearing you about the same on my end.
Okay, that's like very, very strange, but let's move forward. But yeah, there are like then different tools that I kind of already talked about. Like I said, that the data factory workloads basically are very relevant for the DP-700 exam. And there especially we have like Dataflow Gen 2. That is this Power Query-based low-code, no-code data transformation tool. And then we have a pipeline that is more of like a data integration and orchestration tool. And then also we have another tool that is very relevant for the DP-700 exam, and that is the notebook. That is my favorite tool in Fabric. I love notebooks. I love my PySpark notebook and Spark SQL. So with notebook, I would say that it is this kind of like a Swiss Army knife of data engineering, because with notebook, basically you can do whatever you want because you can write code. And we, of course, like to write code, and nowadays we like to vibe code our code. I don't know if you do a lot of vibe coding, Samson. I definitely do with my notebooks, but what about you?
I think I primarily vibe code now. I use this human in the loop vibe coding where I just have it do the first iteration and then I start editing and validating those workflows afterwards.
Yeah. And then we have some real-time intelligence topics in the DP-700 exam as well. And one of the main real-time intelligence tools that you need to know in that exam is Fabric Event Stream. That is basically this low/no code streaming tool that you can use to stream data. So if you want to build near real-time data pipelines, then Event Stream is one of the tools you would check out. Also, there is Spark structured streaming that you can do with notebooks and Spark jobs as well. So that's also another real-time capability within Fabric. But Event Stream is one of the main tools there. Anything you want to add, my friend?
I think you highlighted it really well. A lot of ways to get data into Fabric, and I'm really curious to see and talk more about how we can actually do that within Fabric itself.
Yep.
Awesome. And now with that, now that we understand a little bit about the data storages in Fabric, whether that be OneLake and how data moves around, and the different methods of how you can actually get data into Fabric, I want to dive a little deeper into actually getting data into Fabric. How do we ingest that data and take it to the next level? So when it comes to loading data into Fabric, one of the most common ways you'll load data into Fabric is going to be our traditional batch data method. So batch data loading into Fabric is when you load data incrementally. You maybe run a pipeline, or let's say you run an orchestration job, either daily or hourly, or or your set cadence, and you're bringing in that incrementally loaded data into Fabric. And when it comes to loading batch data into Fabric, you have three primary storage options. That's going to be your Lakehouse. That's going to be Fabric's bread and butter. It's what it's built on. It's going to be that Lakehouse architecture. In addition, you do have that warehouse as well. The nice thing about the Lakehouse and warehouse is that architecturally under the hood, they all run off of Delta Parquet. So they do have that same under the hood architecture. So whether you choose Lakehouse or warehouse, you do have the option to cross database query. You have the option to access those and interact with them both as if they were similar structures. In addition, for those who are used to more your traditional Azure SQL database, you do have your SQL database in Fabric as well. And fun fact, that SQL database in Fabric is actually a Azure SQL database under the hood. So you will get the same functionality, the same feature parity as your traditional Azure SQL database as well. And I know choosing the right option can be hard. There are so many different options to store your data within Fabric. However, I would really analyze your scenario and see which one fits best for you, whether it be that Lakehouse, warehouse, or that SQL database. And it's really going to come down to what are your data orchestration patterns, what are your ETL patterns, what are your integration methods, as well as what are the skill sets of your current team. One thing I like to say is that, hey, if your team is full of SQL DBAs, maybe that SQL database or warehouse might be the best option for you. So really a lot of factors that go into it. And as I talk about data storage, I know I mentioned a lot of data storage options here, and we also mentioned OneLake earlier in the presentation as well. So there might be a little confusion. Well, we have OneLake, we have this one data storage, but you're also telling me there's now three other data storages. There's lakehouses, warehouses, and SQL databases. A good way to look at it is your OneLake is going to be your true data lake storage. That is where all your data is going to be sitting. And these additional data storage options, such as the Lakehouse, warehouse, and SQL databases, these are going to be artifacts within Fabric that live on top of your OneLake. I like to look at them more as organizational containers that actually organize and store your data on top of OneLake. Alexi, curious to see if you have any other additional information about these data storage options within Fabric.
No, I think you explained them very well, and also in the Microsoft Learn documentation there are a very good decision trees, for example, for Lakehouse and warehouse, when to choose which. But yeah, if you are thinking about it from the real world project perspective, then probably you think about your team skill set and what kind of data you want to store. And if you think about medallion architecture, what is the layer you're working with? But because for example, the Lakehouse, you can store data in any format you want, but with warehouse you cannot really do that. So there are a lot of decisions that can come when you need to figure out which data store is right for you.
Awesome. And now moving into batch data ingestion. So we talked a little about data storage options within Fabric on top of OneLake. How do we actually start bringing that batch data in? There's a few tools and techniques to really load, explore, and transform your data as you're bringing it into Microsoft Fabric. I know Alexi's favorite is going to be that Apache Spark, as you're using a lot of those notebooks. For me personally, I am a big fan of Spark using notebooks as well, but I really do love that SQL Analytics endpoint. I grew up on stored procedures, so I love my stored procedures, and it's nice to know that Fabric has those traditional options as well. So you do have that SQL Analytics endpoint, which you can actually hit in both the warehouse as well as the lakehouse. So you are able to query both with traditional SQL. And let's say you're coming from a Power BI background, maybe even an Excel background, and you're more interested in that low code to no code options and ways you can quickly get data into Fabric. You also have that option within Dataflow Gen 2. So for those who are not too familiar with Dataflow Gen 2, Dataflow Gen 2 is built on top of Power Query. So this is where my Excel users and our Power BI users, you can rejoice because you do have that option in Fabric. And now Power Query becomes Dataflow Gen 2, and it's really becoming that more advanced ETL tool, that advanced ingestion tool. So it's no longer just Power Query, it has advanced features such as incremental loads, and you can really bring that data from your source into Fabric as well. You also have your data pipelines. Your data pipelines are also going to offer some low code, no code options to bring data into Fabric, as well as it's going to be a great orchestrator as well. So as you're using notebooks, you're using stored procedures or Dataflow Gen 2, your data pipeline is going to go ahead and tie all of those together, wrap those up, and go ahead and be that orchestrator that can drive when you're going to run those workflows as well. And lastly, shortcuts. And I will highlight mirroring as well, but mirroring is not on the slide. Shortcuts and mirroring are another quick way to get data into Fabric. So shortcuts, similar to what Alexi mentioned earlier, is going to be kind of like those connectors. It's going to allow you to connect to those data sources directly and query those data sources directly, where mirroring is going to create that near real-time replicated data source within Fabric itself. And I know it's thrown a lot right now, but Alexi, any other data ingestion methods for batch data you want to call out that we might have missed here?
No, I think you covered them very well, but this highlights that we have so many different options in Fabric. So it's not like just we have just one tool, one skill set that you can be using like Microsoft Fabric. We have so many different options depending on your background. You have like many different tools like no code, low code, pro code, everything in between. So really, sometimes it can be hard to pick out the tools that you really want to use. So it can be a tough decision which ones you should use, because I don't think in like a proper like a real world project you should probably use every tool that's available. Maybe you should make a decision which tools you want to use in your architecture and mainly focus on those. But still, there are a lot of options to suit like different teams and different developers and those kind of things. So a lot of tools to choose from.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You called out, Alexi. A lot of tools to choose from. A lot of times you get a little bit overloaded of which one to pick, especially as you're starting your data architecture. Which one do you pick? Do you mix and match? I know a lot of people say try to not mix and match too many different artifacts so you don't have to do too much overhead for management. But really that ingestion decision guide, how do you choose which one to use, which one's best for you? Well, fortunately, there is a ingestion decision guide we're going to go into a little bit. And the three main ones we want to focus on is going to be that data pipeline copy activity, as well as the Dataflow Gen 2, as well as Spark. So these are just a few of the more common ones, but there are different ingestion methods as well. So I definitely consider all of them depending on your use case. But the first one's going to be that data pipeline copy activity. This is going to be directly in the pipeline itself. This is going to allow you to copy data from your source directly into your target. And this provides a lot of low code as well as no code options. And this is really for your SQL developers or your ETL developers who are more familiar with SQL or JSON, as I know the pipelines do rely on a lot of JSON for their backend architecture. And in terms of that development interface, you're going to have a Copilot integrated assistant. And pretty much for most of these, you will have Copilot integration. So if you're like Alexi and I, you like vibe coding, you want some of that AI power, there's plenty of that within all of these these tools and all of these connectors as well. And with the data pipeline connectivity, there are 30 plus connectors already natively built in. So you might not even have to use APIs or write custom code to connect. A lot of times you'll have those native connectors built into the source you're looking to integrate from, and you'll be able to integrate that directly. In addition, you have a lot of destinations. So once you copy that data with your pipeline, you can land it either in a Lakehouse, warehouse, OneLake, SQL database, really the possibilities are endless. And when it comes to transformation complexity, when you're copying data within Fabric, within a copy activity within a pipeline, this is really recommended for low transformations, lightweight transformations. Really, you want to be using a more customizable or advanced tool for those customizations and true transformations. I like to use copy activity personally to land data in my staging layer or my source layer, just in my data lake, and then use other tools such as notebooks, stored procedures, or Dataflow Gen 2 to start transforming that data as it comes in. Moving on to Dataflow Gen 2, this is really going to be our Power Query-based ingestion tool. So you'll have ways to bring in the data, transform it, wrangle it, and transform it as it's coming in using that traditional that familiar Power Query interface. And really, this is going to be for our SQL developers, our ETL developers, as well as our M and Power BI developers. So if you're someone who's coming over from the Power BI world, looking to dip your toes a little bit into the data engineering side of the house, I think Dataflow Gen 2s are a really good way to bridge that gap and really lower that barrier to entry as you're going into it. And with Power Query, since it's been such a long tool in the industry, it has over 150 connectors. So a lot of the connectors you're familiar with within Power BI have moved over to Fabric, as well as many more as well. And similar to our data pipeline copy activity, plenty of destinations where you can land that data, whether it be Lakehouses, your databases, or your warehouses and more. And with Dataflow Gen 2, you can have a little bit more robust transformation capabilities. So within the Dataflow itself, you'll be able to manipulate and transform your data as needed. So you'll have a lot more options as well. And lastly, the one that's I'm going to call the most flexible. So similar to what Alexi said, it's going to be that Swiss Army knife of your ETL. It's going to be that Spark. Because with Spark, you'll have options to ingest and transform your data as well. And with Spark, this is going to be more for your pro code developers, your developers who love to get in the weeds of coding and write a fully code-based approach. So with Spark, you have support for Scala, Python, Spark SQL, as well as R. And your development interface is going to be mostly notebook-based. So you're going to be driving most of this through notebooks within Fabric. And with using notebooks, you have access to hundreds of Spark libraries. So plenty of libraries that you can use as your data source, as well as your data destination as well. And you can read your data from multiple destinations, and you can write to it from multiple destinations from within the notebook itself as well. And for transformation complexity, this is going to probably offer you the most flexibility, as it's going to be a full code approach. You're able to write code however you want to transform your data as needed as well.
Yeah, and you can write your own libraries for notebooks if you want to do so. So a lot more flexibility there as well. But I really want to highlight that this thing is really important for the exam. So you really need to know the differences of these different tools and when you should use which. And there is the link on the top right corner there, so where you can find this in the documentation. So definitely check this out and learn these differences if you're planning to take the exam anytime soon, because I think this will be tested in the exam, or most likely, so you know your tools there.
And it's just a really good piece of information to have, just to know what's best and what fits in your architecture.
Yeah. And also one tool came to my mind when you asked like any other like data ingestion and those kind of tools. I think we didn't talk about copy job, but I assume that it's not yet part of the DP-700 exam. It's a relatively new thing, or not so new thing anymore, but still there is a copy job that is basically your data pipeline copy activity to separate it to a separate Fabric item, and there you have some different options that you can use. But it's a really handy tool in Fabric, and if you are working with Fabric, you should definitely check that out.
Yeah, definitely love the copy job. I know there's a lot of templates and preset integrations for the copy job, so it definitely makes setting up that ingestion way quicker, way easier.
Yeah.
So love that copy job. That's a great call out. I almost forgot about that one.
Yeah, me too.
Next, once that data is in, how do we actually transform and orchestrate that data? So taking this to the next level. So now our data is landed in our data lake, OneLake, and we're ready to go ahead and move this data around, transform or orchestrate it as needed. Well, we have a few tools here. So similar to the data ingestion, our data ingestion tools are pretty much also going to be our data orchestration and transformation tools as well. So we have Dataflow Gen 2s, pipelines, notebooks, as well as real-time intelligence. So with your Dataflow Gen 2, not only can they be an ingestion tool, they can also be that transformation tool. so you're able to transform it as needed. And it's also going to be a great orchestration tool as well. So let's say you make a Dataflow Gen 2 and you want to orchestrate directly from it. You are able to schedule your Dataflow Gen 2 directly on the Dataflow itself. In addition, let's say you are using pipelines. Personally, pipelines are going to be my favorite orchestrator, as you can tie many different items together. But with pipelines, you're going to be able to tie a bunch of items together, automate and schedule those workflows. So let's say you have a Dataflow Gen 2, let's say you have a stored procedure, let's say you have a notebook, let's say you have the whole shebang out there. You got everything going on in your environment. You can call all of those from your pipeline directly, orchestrate them at a certain time, or you can even make them event-based. So let's say maybe you detect a file drop. You can go ahead and trigger that pipeline as needed. So a lot of options to orchestrate your data and make sure you can orchestrate your workflows as well. In addition, we're going to go back to those notebooks. So notebooks going to offer the most flexibility for transformation, but you're also going to be able to use it as an orchestration as well. And you can go ahead and schedule your notebooks as well. And lastly, the one I want to highlight very briefly, as we're going to dive into it a little deeper, is going to be that real-time intelligence. So real-time intelligence is going to allow you to ingest that data in real time via event streams as well as Custo, so KQL. So you're going to be able to use that for orchestration as well as transformation in flight as well, which is really awesome. And the nice thing about all these transformation orchestration tools is that they are fully integrated OneLake. So all transformations do write back in Delta Parquet and with the governance rules enforced across the Microsoft Fabric stack. The orchestration respects all workspace rules as well as item permissions as well. So you do know you have a governed environment and you have a secure environment as well.
Yeah, maybe it would be cool to hear from the chat, like, what is your favorite tool? What is your favorite data transformation tool in Fabric? Like I said, mine is notebooks, and I think Samson is also a big fan of notebooks. But are there people who like the Dataflow Gen 2, for example? Because that's typically the conversation, Dataflow Gen 2 or notebooks. That would be nice to hear from the chat.
Yeah, and I'd really love to hear from chat about Dataflow Gen 2, because I know recently there have been a lot of strides in Dataflow Gen 2. They're now a lot more performant, a lot more efficient as well. So not consuming as much CUs as before. So I'm really curious to see if anyone's been playing around with those Dataflow Gen 2s or other transformation methods, and how are those working for you in your architecture? Are there any lessons learned? Awesome. Seeing a lot of notebook lovers in the chat. So I know I think we have the right audience here, Lexi. I think we have the right people here.
Team notebooks. Yeah. Should we move forward so we have time to cover the whole presentation?
And I know I touched briefly on real-time intelligence Fabric. Wanted to dive a little deeper into this, as this is going to be a component of the exam as well. Separate from our traditional batch data ingestion within Fabric, we also have real-time intelligence or streaming within Fabric as well. So this is going to be for your real-time data pulling into Fabric as it's coming in from your source. So you have a few. So when it comes to real-time intelligence, how that data gets pulled in is actually going to be through the event stream artifact. So within Fabric, there's going to be an event stream artifact that's going to allow you to set up that real-time data ingestion as well as transformations as it's being ingested, which is really awesome that that's even a thing. It can transform data as it's pulling it in. And with that event house, that's where the data is traditionally going to land. So with your event stream, you're going to have this new storage layer as well. It's going to be a little different than a lakehouse or a warehouse. It's going to be actually called an event house. And this is where your real-time intelligence data is going to land. And you're going to be able to actually query it using a separate query language called KQL. So that's going to be Custo Query Language. Very, very similar to SQL, but there are some nuanced differences. But when you're working with event-based data, KQL is going to be your bread and butter for slicing and dicing and querying that data as well. And within real-time intelligence, you also have options for real-time reporting as well. So you're going to have real-time dashboards that can provide those interactive visualizations and allow you to explore your data in real time. And the last cool thing about real-time intelligence within Fabric is as you're bringing that data in, there's actually a functionality called Activator, which is one of my favorites. It is super awesome, which actually monitors your data as it's coming in. So you can go ahead and set up automated actions or even Power Automate workflows that can trigger entirely based on the data that's coming in. So let's say you set a KPI, for example, that you want to monitor, or a data stream you want to monitor, and it passes that threshold. You can trigger and kick off the entire workflow automatically with using real-time intelligence in Fabric. So this really takes your work from not just reactive, but to being proactive with your data as well as your workflows as well. But Alexi, curious to hear if you have any insights on real-time intelligence. Have you used it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have used it a bit. And one thing that I really want to call out, since this is a DP-700 session, you should really know KQL in the exam. So it's an important part of that exam, and KQL is not that difficult to learn. And there is a great resource online for learning KQL called Kusto Detective Agency. Maybe one of our moderators could put that to the chat. So that is a great place to learn KQL if you don't know KQL. But basically, like Samson said, is pretty similar to SQL. There are a few things different there. There's this pipe syntax and those kind of things. But if you already know the SQL, I think learning KQL is not that hard. But I would definitely check out Kusto Detective Agency if you're planning to learn KQL. And I saw that Kevin now already put that link to the chat. So check that out if you want to learn KQL.
Yeah, and that detective one is a cool one. It's a really fun way to learn KQL, so I personally love it as well. That's a really cool one. Without further
Yeah.
ado, I'll go ahead and move on to our next portion. I'm going to go ahead and pass on to Alexi, who will talk a little bit about monitoring and optimizing Fabric solutions.
Yeah, obviously, when we build like solutions, we build them, but typically we want to derive some business value out of them. And when we are deriving that business value out of them, we want to also monitor them. So we know that do our data pipelines and data flows, our notebooks and those things even work. So if they keep failing in production and nobody notices, then our business is not getting the data that they need. So we need some monitoring there. And of course, in Fabric, we have many different monitoring capabilities that allow you to monitor your Fabric solutions. So there are like many different monitoring things. Maybe you could click one step forward so we get the this underneath the slide. So there are like typically you want to also identify what you want to monitor, because in many cases you don't want to monitor everything, and differentiate like what is important to you and what to monitor. And one of the typical things that I, for example, use in my real world projects that I use heavily, like data pipelines as the orchestration tool for my solution. So how I built my solution, that I have a data pipeline that basically runs some activities, maybe copy data activity for data ingestion, and then there are notebooks for data processing, etc. And then what I do, I monitor that data pipeline where I have grouped all those activities that cover my solutions. So I get notified if that data pipeline has failed. And there are multiple different ways how you can get notified. And we're gonna soon talk about like Monitoring Hub, and also the Activator is a very good tool for monitoring that Samson already mentioned with the real-time intelligence, because with the Activator you can build rules that will then trigger if something happens with the specific Fabric items. For example, a data pipeline fails, then Activator will send an email or a Teams message. But yeah, maybe we could go to the next slide and there talk about these different tools that we can use to monitor Fabric. As the most obvious tool, we have the Fabric Monitoring Hub, where we are able to see almost all of the Fabric items, how they run, and what is the status, for example, your pipelines, your semantic model refreshes, and data flows and notebooks. So this is a one centralized hub and place where you see those different items and you are able to monitor them. Something you want to add, Samson, here about like Monitoring Hub or monitoring Fabric items in general?
I think you touched base on it. You highlighted some great components about it, but definitely the monitoring hub is a great place to be to make sure you're watching your workloads as they're going off. Really important thing is to look for those bad actors. Sometimes there are going to be workloads that are running for literal hours,
Yeah.
and that can really tank or bottleneck a lot of your compute and capacity. So this is a great way to catch that, and you can mix that with Activator as well to go ahead and call out those bad actors as they're in flight to make sure that you have a way to stop those in time.
Yeah, that was a really good point, because it's not always about like monitoring what has failed. It's sometimes that things get stuck and they
Mhm.
run for ages. Of course, with like proper development practices, you can kind of mitigate that issue a bit. So, for example, set some timeout limits that things will eventually fail, so that they won't run like 4 days without failing. So that's like, but that's another topic that you can do during the development work already, and what you should do. But yeah, very good point there. Then there are other tools that you can use to monitor the Fabric environment. For example, we have these different reports that Microsoft is already providing as a default. The previous report you showed there was what was the feature usage and adaptation report, where you can see some feature usage and what kind of features are used across Fabric, etc. So this basically admin information for your Fabric administrators to see what are the things that are going on in Fabric. And then we have the other report that is basically for monitoring your capacities, because like we didn't cover that well in this session, but basically you should know that Fabric is powered by Fabric capacity, and it's basically this kind of a compute that powers your Fabric, and you have a limit of capacity that you can consume, let's say, that way, so that you can basically run out of capacity, and you don't want to end up to that situations. With, for example, with this capacity metrics app, you can monitor your Fabric capacity or capacities and see what's going on there, and then maybe take actions if you see that maybe some workload, some workspaces, or those are consuming too much capacity. And I also want to mention that there is this kind of a very cool community-made resource for capacity management called FUAM. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's basically a community-made capacity metrics app that has a ton of information about capacities, and you can really use it to drill down to very fine level what's happening in your Fabric environment. Anything you want to add about like capacity monitoring or this stuff?
I think that's a great call out. Fuam is definitely one of my favorites as well. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of flexibility in how you can actually monitor your capacities. So within event streams as well, you can pull your capacity metrics in real time. So let's say you want to build a custom solution using real-time intelligence, there's ways to do that as well. So a lot of flexibility, or you can even use the Fabric APIs to get some backend information about what's going on in the Fabric environment. So in addition to these built-in tools, there's a lot of ways, and you can customize it, expand it, and really make it your own within Fabric as well.
Yeah, cool. Should we move forward? We have less than 10 minutes left, 7 minutes. Yes, so about some additional learning, maybe let's go to the next slide there. Like I said, this is a 1 hour session and we have almost spent it all. There are like a lot more things to cover in the DP-700 exam that we didn't have time to go through, or time to dig into proper detail, because you need to know these things in quite detail in that exam. So it's not a high level exam. You really need to know your stuff, but there are like a lot of resources that you can use online, and especially like on Microsoft Learn, there is this like a already good learning path for DP-700 exam that basically covers all the topics that you should know there. And then there's like other community-made resources that can help you out, like for example from me and then from other people. Anything you want to add about the additional resources, Samson?
I think all of these additional learning resources are really great. I know Lexi has a lot of resources he's put out as well, which are really great for studying the exam. But I think as you approach exam day, one thing I like to tell people is don't overwhelm yourself. Don't you just study what you need to study. And I know there's a lot of content to memorize, and truthfully, you probably won't remember it all. There's just too much to memorize. But one thing I like to tell people that I found out way too late is on the exam itself, you do have access to Microsoft Learn documentation, actually,
Yep.
which is really cool. So you have a pop-out tab. You can go ahead and access that Microsoft Learn documentation. So I would always recommend and encourage people to, hey, really study up that Microsoft Learn documentation. Know like the back of your hand, as that documentation is fairly robust and will give you a lot of information you need to really not only develop these great solutions and great architectures, but pass the exam itself as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind the time management when you use the documentation, because you don't want to browse through the documentation on your first question and spend like 15 minutes with that question going through the documentation. So it can be really a double-edged sword. So time management strategy in the exam is really important. And also I want to say that people who are planning to take the DP-700 exam, please schedule that exam immediately, so you have that like a clear deadline that you're working towards, and you can always reschedule the exam if you don't meet the deadline or you are a bit unsure that do you have all the skills necessary. But when you schedule it, you make sure that you eventually take the exam. So that's really important there. And also I want to say that if you have the possibility, take the exam at the test center and not remotely, because when you take the exam remotely, there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and in the test center they kind of make sure that those things won't go wrong. But that's just a quick tip there.
Yeah, that's definitely a great tip. And another note is that if you're studying on Microsoft Learn, there's also a really cool thing is that there's also plenty of practice questions as well as a sandbox environment. So you can practice your knowledge as well as practice implementing it as well, which is really cool. But just to wrap us up and close us out, I do want to talk a little bit more about the resources and upcoming schedule for the next events coming down the line. Now, a big highlight, I mentioned this earlier, but in case you did miss it earlier, in order to get your DP-700 certification voucher, you do need to request your voucher today. So please scan the QR code, fill out that form as soon as possible, as supplies are limited and the offer ends on April 20th or while supplies last. And that code word is going to be pipeline. And to my knowledge, it is not case sensitive. So that's going to be that code word right there. It's going to be pipeline. And we are running that Fabric Data Days monthly session. So that next one's going to be on April 28th and 29th, going over that integration blueprint. So if you liked what you saw today, you are curious about how do you actually implement these tools and data engineering workloads into a full-fledged solution, this is going to be a great session to attend, as it's going to show that full end-to-end Microsoft Fabric demo as well. In addition, with that Fabric conference and SQL conference recap series, this series is really meant for those who not only did not attend Fabric conference or SQL conference who might have missed out, but even for those who attended, if you want a quick recap and just want to get all of that core important information that's coming out of that conference, these are great sessions to attend, and we still have a few more left. The next one that's coming up is actually going to be next week, and it's going to be about maximizing that developer experience within Microsoft Fabric. So these are must-watch sessions, and I really highly recommend you watch these sessions. You want to come away with the core components and information from those sessions from the Microsoft Fabric conference and SQL conference. And lastly, to wrap us up, just want to make sure that we do need your feedback, and we would really love to have your feedback. So if you know someone who's new to Fabric, or you are yourself a Fabric or Power BI user, we do want to hear from you. There's going to be some surveys you can take that give us your information, to give us your opinion on your Fabric experience, whether it be what worked, what didn't work, as well as for our current Fabric or Power BI users, we are hosting Fabric user panels where you can share your feedback directly with the Microsoft Fabric team and really help influence and shape that product to be what you really want it to be. And with that, that's pretty much all we had today. We are really excited you all could join us. It was super awesome seeing people from all over around the world excited about that DP-700. Before I sign off, Alexei, anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, just maybe as a little teaser that me and Samson might be doing some content together in the future. So follow us to see what kind of content we are going to produce. So that's a little teaser that I want to give to people. So at least follow my YouTube channel and Samson's YouTube channel. So something might be coming up really soon.
Yeah, great call out. And thanks all for joining. We appreciate having you all here, and we hope to see you at the next one.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, You can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.